On today's video, I bring you a comparison between building and renewing in Portugal. Since we are renewing a home and we also have looked at the possibility of building a house from scratch, today we bring you a comparison between the two. What are the pros, what are the cons, and which one might be the most suitable approach for you. So let's go. Let's start with a new build. What are the benefits? What are the pros of the new build? So first of all, with the new build, what you have is a clean canvas. You can design everything you want. You do have probably some limitations on the plot you bought because of camera. They always have limitations on how many square meters you can implant and how high you can go and some specifications. But once you get acquainted with those, you are ready to dream that house. So you have a clean canvas and you can do whatever you want with some limitations, but you can let your imagination go. So that's one of the main benefits, that clean canvas element. Being able to do insulation right from the very beginning is key, because you've probably noticed, if you're already living in Portugal or you're planning to come and have stayed in houses, that insulation on the existing builds leaves a lot to lack. I mean, it's not good. Let's just be honest. It's very hard to find even new properties that have proper insulation. So having the opportunity to do this from the get-go is pretty awesome. You can really make sure that you have the right insulation, that you have everything that you need on the walls, how you want to insulate, if you want to use what's called landrocha or another very thick material that now I don't remember the name. But you have plenty of options. And since you're building from scratch, you can really think them through, see what makes the most sense for your family. Do you want to do acoustic? Do you want to use cork? There's so many options for insulation. And since you're doing them from the beginning, you can really research and choose which one is the most appropriate. And the second one is climatization, which is tied to insulation, because the better you do insulation in your home, the better you're going to retain the heat and the better you're going to retain the cold. So that's a huge benefit of building from scratch. You can really think those through from the ground up and do what it's in your budget, because there's a lot of insulations you can go and for different budgets. So there you go. That's one of the opportunities of a new build. Major benefit of a new build is that you're going to have this house all legalized, because in a new build, you're going to be asking a lot of permits to Camera, and they will make sure that you're complying to the law, that you have everything proper, that the electric installation is proper, that all the plot is documented and registered in the Camera. So from the get-go, you should come out with a new build that is fully legalized. And why is this so important? Because let's say in a couple of years you want to sell this property, having it all legal is a huge plus for the potential buyers. A lot of folks don't even look at properties that have issues with camera, meaning they have a space in the plot that's not legalized, then you need to make an architecture project, have it approved. So it's a lot of hassles. So a lot of buyers of new properties, they don't even look at anything that has these kinds of issues. So when you do a new build, there's no way around it. You should have everything properly legalized. That's going to be a huge benefit down the road when you want to sell it. That's fully legalized and you have a bigger pool of potential buyers. So that's another benefit of a new build. As with everything, there is pros, but there's absolutely some cons that you should keep in mind. And with the new build, remember that pro that I called out as having a clean canvas being a benefit? Well, this works against you as well, because having a clean canvas can mean that you put that house as you dreamed it, and then when you get it scoped for how much it's gonna cost, is gonna be a lot of money. So that's one of the challenges. One of the cons is a new canvas also doesn't give you any restraints for you to really go above and beyond on your dream. And then when you start asking for quotes from builders, then you have the realization that you've gone way above budget. And I say that because that has happened to us. We had started thinking about the build project, and we had a clean canvas, and we started dreaming and dreaming, going through Pinterest, seeing some beautiful houses and thinking, I need that, and I need that, I need that. And then when we started looking at how much it's going to cost, it was way above our budget. So you need to keep in mind what can happen when you have a clean canvas. Another con that you're going to have in a new build is licensing. Licensing can come through being very, very expensive, especially depending on the camera where your house is going to be built. I mean, big city cameras are going to have nifty bills for you when you start licensing the construction, because you need permits. And those permits are going to be expensive depending on where you are. So you need to keep that in mind with the new builds, that is a con. And the fact that if you get delayed, you ask the permit on the very beginning for, let's say, 9 months, and your build drags because of lack of materials, labor, you name it, you'll have to renew that. And it's going to cost you money. Is bureaucracy. Everyone hates it, but exists, and you need to go through it. And the biggest bureaucracy here that you need to start with is getting your project approved in camera. And that can take a long time. It can take anything from 3 months to 6 months to you name it, depending on which camera, what's their backlog, how well versed your architect is in that camera. I mean, it's all about people and about the load they have right now. So you need to keep that in mind, that you might be ready to build, but you still need to go through all the approvals and vouchers from camera so they get your project approved and you can start. Seeing that is quite a number of cons here with a new build. And why? Because we really went through the process of comparing a new build with a renovation before we decided on doing our own renovation. And while thinking about a new build, we found all these cons. So there's 3 more I want to talk to you about. I hope I'm not overwhelming you. But first of all is time. A new build requires a lot of time on planning, a lot of time during execution, and a lot of time following up on different elements with the build, with camera, with the architect. It is time consuming, but it might be worth it for you to get your dream house as you expected in the location you wish. The second one is that you can become a hostage of the builder. You need to think about that. The builder is not only handling your build, it's probably handling several. And if for some reason the materials are not arriving to your build, he might go finish the other ones and you're hostage of him to finish your build. And that's a huge one that got us really concerned. Being hostage of someone is never a situation where you want to be. And the last one is that it can be a slippery slope to spending more money than you actually initially thought. And this happens why? Because your build might drag and then the cost of materials go up, or by the fact that you're already in it and you're doing a new build and you're thinking, why don't I do this extra and that other extra because I'm building from scratch? This is the time to do all these extras. But all these extras add up to a lot of money. So in a new build, you have the opportunity to do something magnificent, something that meets the needs of your family, but you need to be a really good project manager, and you really need to be really good on the budget side, and you need to think, is this really worth it? Is this worth it going about my budget or not? And having a lot of patience, because imagine you're doing a new build and then back in the day COVID hits, everything stops. I mean, you never know what can happen, and these are risks. No matter new build or renewal, it's gonna happen. But again, I just wanted to call out all of them, and you can make your own decision if this is the right one for you or not. So let's jump into the other comparison, which is a renovation. Let's go. Okay, so now we go into renovations, and that's what we've decided to do. As I've mentioned before, we were considering very strongly to do a new build, and then we leaned towards a renovation. And the first reason for a renovation that we chose is that is very cost effective. It's cost effective for a couple of reasons. The first one being that if you are in a historical neighborhood, you have a 6% EVA. You have 6% EVA on the materials and on the labor, if I'm not wrong. and that allow us to reduce the cost of the build. So that's awesome to have that benefit. The another benefit that has a renovation is that you have constraints. Remember on the new build where constraints could be a positive and a negative? Here is most definitely a positive. Why? Because constraints keep you grounded. They keep you grounded on what you can and cannot do. So therefore also keeps you grounded on spending money. Although it can have some tricky situations where you get unexpected costs. But we've noted so far on our renovation that the constraints of what was already there built help us keep us grounded and spend less money. So overall, a renovation tends to be more cost effective because you already, even if you do a completely drastic renovation as we are doing in the house in Alentejo, where we pretty much rebuild everything from the inside, is still gonna come out cheaper than for us to doing a new build. Huge benefit of a renovation is the fact that you need to ask almost no licenses to camera, like barely almost anything. You probably might need to ask a license, as we did, to be able to occupy the street for a little while when you put some stairs and you're renovating the exterior. That's one of them. But other than that, it pretty much doesn't need any license because you bought this property already with an habitational license, so that's already addressed, and the renovations that you're doing are in the inside and not on the exterior. If you're doing changes on the exterior, that's a very different story, and it's going to depend on the camera, what on the camera is allowing or not allowing you to do. But for the interior, you barely need to ask anything. So that's a huge plus, less bureaucracy and less waiting. Is the fact that you're completely renewing something that already existed. So you're giving a new life to a new building, to a new single family, and there's always a huge joy on that. Especially if you're in a neighborhood, everyone appreciates that it's getting a new refresh uplift. So it's a lot of joy of renovating something old and giving it a new life. So a renovation has cons, and it's not all joy and wonders. There's definitely some challenges that you need to tackle. The first one of them being structural issues, and that is hard, right? If you buy a property and you weren't able to catch these structural issues before you bought it, now you have a big problem in your hands that you need to solve. But again, everything has probably a way to solve it. It's just going to depend on how much money you need to pour into this problem. Luckily, in our renovation here in Alentejo, we haven't found any structural issues, but they might exist in other properties. So that's something that you really need to do a due diligence before you purchase to make sure that does not have any structural issues. Is the fact that as you start your rebuild, you might find a couple of things that you were not expecting and you had not budget for it that need to be replaced. So let's imagine you're opening up the ceilings of this house and it has wooden beams and they are all rotting. I mean, you didn't expect that, it was hidden, you couldn't know, and now you need to fix it. Con of doing a renovation is the fact that sometimes you have unexpected expenses. The materials can go up while you're doing the renovation, or you're spending more than you initially had budget. And that happens with the renovation because you never know what you might find out as you start doing the rebuild. The con we have with the renovation is the fact that you have some restrictions and rules that you need to abide by. And those are the ones from the camera. So there's some things you might not be able to do to the exterior of the building. Imagine it's white and you want to paint it purple. Probably you can't do that. You need to check with camera always. Or something that happened to us was that we were considering changing the roof of one of the small houses we have, but we couldn't do that because camera says that you need to use specific materials. So that's something you need to keep in mind, is the rules that are gonna govern the area where you're doing the renovation, and that you can do by checking with camera. Another con in a renovation is the fact that you start and you find some materials that you want to keep in the house, but you can no longer find anyone that does those materials. An example is the floor. Imagine you have a specific tile floor and one of them is broken, and you can no longer find the provider that gives you that exact match. So then you need to make a decision. Do you want to patch it up or do you want to completely replace it? So there you have it. There is pros and cons when you look at doing a new build or a renovation in Portugal. Both of them have advantages and disadvantages. In our specific case, after analyzing all the pros and cons, we decided to go ahead with a renovation. And the main reason for us to go with a renovation was the fact that a new build was going to take a really long time, and also the element that going through all the bureaucracy and the increasing prices of material and labor were a huge issue as well. It was going to go above our budget. So a renovation helped us keep our costs down and help us achieve this renovation in a shorter amount of time. As always, you need to check the pros and cons for your specific situation. What is the most benefic for you, and as well what you're the most comfortable with. As always, thank you so much for watching. Let us know your comments and questions. We are happy to read them.